Hello. I thought I could do a little thing for you now about the Truman Doctrine. This is one of the really, really important parts of the early stages of the Cold War. It will pretty much probably feature in your section 1 of your Cold War examination. You really need to be aware of it. It's really, really, really important. Previously we talked about the collapse of the wartime alliance, the Grand Alliance, and the Truman Doctrine is one of those key events that explains why the wartime alliance finally broke down. Now, the thing to remember about the Truman Doctrine is there's some key vocab to use. You need to use the word containment. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but bear it in mind when you're trying to explain this answer. So, the Truman Doctrine, 1947, 2 years after the end of the war. Bearing in mind what's preceded the Truman Doctrine, we've had the previous episode about Soviet expansion into Eastern Europe and the disagreements at Potsdam in particular. Now, the Truman Doctrine is, well, it's Truman, the President of America, and basically he makes a speech in which he very clearly sets out his ideas. And that's what a doctrine is. It's a set of beliefs. And this is Truman's beliefs for America and what they ought to be doing. Now, what he says is, quote, "I believe that it must be the policy of the USA to support peoples who resist being enslaved by armed minorities or by outside pressure. I believe we must help free people to work out their own destiny in their own way." That's quite a long thing to remember. You can try and remember bits and pieces of it, little chunks of it. That's a really good idea. But I'm going to come back to it in a minute and explain exactly what it really means. So, the kind of exam questions you're going to get are going to be on the causes, or what the Truman Doctrine was, or the consequences of the Truman Doctrine. So let's start with the causes. Right. I reckon there are 3 causes of the Truman Doctrine. All right, pretty easy to do. Firstly, the USA and Truman believed that the Soviet Union was trying to spread communism throughout the world. And that's obviously because of what's preceded it with the Soviet expansion into places like Poland, Hungary, Romania, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, amongst others, Czechoslovakia. So the Americans had a kind of fear that communism was expanding. And secondly, you have to remember that in 1945 America had developed the atomic bomb, and that had given it military superiority over Russia. Now, they had this great advantage over Russia, and they really, really, really wanted to make the very most of that. So, America kind of wanted to put pressure on Russia to stop their expansion, and it used the threat of the atomic bomb, or not the threat, maybe the fear the Russians had of the atomic bomb. I don't think the Americans ever said, "Look, stop expanding, or we're going to blow you up." But the Russians knew that was in the American arsenal, and they could use it if necessary. So, America was fearful of communism spreading, and America was keen to use its superiority in the nuclear arms race, in nuclear developments. Now, the third one is the one that I must admit I always forget, and my students generally tend to forget. And it's the key cause of the Truman Doctrine, and it's Greece. Now, what happened was, in the Second World War, Greece had been occupied by the Germans, and once the Germans had left, there became a civil war in Greece between, on one hand, the royalists, the king and his supporters, the traditional supporters of the Greek monarchy, and they're supported by Britain, and on the other hand, the communists, who wanted communism in Greece. So, this civil war's going on, and Britain's helping the monarchists, because obviously remember that Churchill really doesn't like communism. And Britain had 40,000 troops in Greece at this stage. And it gave money to Greece, the Greek government, and to Turkey to prevent the spread of communism. The problem is, as we talked about earlier, Britain's economy after the Second World War was pretty pants. We didn't have a great deal of cash, and suddenly spending out all this money on Greece, when we actually had to rebuild Britain as well, it didn't seem like a very good idea. So we said to America, "Look, we can't afford to do this anymore, we're going to have to pull out." Now, America obviously was particularly fearful of the spread of communism, didn't want it to get any further than it had gone. So, what the Americans said was, "Look, it's okay, we will pay you $400 million to help." So essentially the Americans financed the anti-capitalist groups in Greece. Now, following Greece, as soon as the Truman had said, look, we'll pay you the $400 million to fight the communists, what happened was Truman then said the Truman Doctrine. And he set out his clear aims in foreign policy. I believe it must be the policy of the USA to support peoples who resist being enslaved by armed minorities. That's the bit I can't remember. To resist being enslaved by armed minorities or by outside pressure. And then he said, I believe we must help the free peoples to work out their own destiny in their own way. Now, I'll translate that for you into regular English. What he's saying is, we're going to help any country that's threatened from either inside or outside, either invasion or civil war. But essentially what he means is, we're going to help anyone that's threatened by communism. Okay? What he's planning to do is to contain communism. Not crush it, not wipe it out, but stop it from growing any bigger. Contain. And that's this American policy of containment. Key word, stick it in your answer, it shows really good knowledge. So, basically Truman says we're going to help anyone that wants to resist communism. And he says the world is divided into two camps. Capitalism, free. The free world. Communism, not free. Not good. And what he said was that America is going to use its economic and its military might to protect the world from the spread of communism. Right. What he's basically doing is sending a massive, great big warning to Stalin. And he's saying, right, you've expanded, that's enough. Don't go any further, or I'll stop you. This is part of his get tough with Russia policy. Right, so that's the events. Then I reckon there are five results, super easy to remember. One, the Greek government defeated the communists. Not surprising, they had $400 million from America to help them do it. Secondly, rivalry between Russia and America grew massively, funnily enough, after the Truman Doctrine. And the world was divided into two armed camps. Nice little phrase, throw it in. Thirdly, the USA became committed to a policy of containment and became very involved in European affairs. Fourthly, and this is really important, as part of the Truman Doctrine, the Americans introduced Marshall Aid, or the Marshall Plan. Okay? And as a consequence of that, the Russians set up Cominform. And so you have consequences of the Truman Doctrine. All right? That gets you very good marks. If it's a key features question, don't forget causes of the Truman Doctrine, events of the Truman Doctrine, and consequences. And if you use your nice connectives there to explain your answer, you're going to get top marks. All right, rewind it, listen, make some notes, causes, events, results. Hope that's helpful.